Welcome back, everybody. Welcome. Come on in. So, if you listened to the last episode, you already know exactly what went down. And I know some of you probably logged off thinking, all right, so what happened after that? Because we know that real life doesn't end at just a rebuke, right? Yeah. Temptation doesn't just evaporate forever just because somebody said, not today, Satan. So let me take you right there. Here's the thing. Kurt didn't change after that night. He was still Kurt, still showing up, still checking in, still listening, still, being the kind guy that he was. And that just made the attachment even more dangerous. And that's the part people don't really want to talk about because sometimes the struggle isn't a bad man. It's very much a good man who remains good. So we sat down again intentionally this time and not to flirt. Not that I'm suggesting that we had set out to flirt. Not to flirt, not to test ourselves, but to name what almost happened. And we were painfully honest. We talked about how close we came, how the attraction wasn't imaginary, how it wasn't one sided. And we were just being truthful, and how it almost scored bigger than before. The pull between us was really heavy, almost irresistible. And that kind of attraction doesn't shout, it hums. It's constant, it's low, it's dangerous. And then Kirk said something that cut me deep. Not because it was harsh, but because it was right. He said, to be honest with you, I didn't mind having you, but I mind at the same time. I really, really mind. And listen, that alone was enough to weaken me all over again because what he said was just attractive. Attractive because he represented quality, the kind of sort of man that I needed. Like, listen, who? Anyway, but he didn't stop there. He said, I just can't give in to temptation because I'm tempted. I don't know why I wouldn't just fall for the man. He told me he didn't want me to walk away later with guilt that he helped to create. And that he didn't want me, replaying moments in my head asking, why did I let that happen? Anyways, he said, further added that settling down wasn't something that we had thought through properly. And not because he didn't care, but it's because he cared too much. He told me straight, not being willing to risk losing God's plan for either of us, even if that plan includes us being together. Let me tell you something. That didn't sound romantic. It sounded responsible. It sounded attractive because that's a type of person I would have wanted. I remember sitting there thinking, what else is left for me not to be drawn to? He was kind, present, as I said, disciplined, God-fearing, respected. He was a complete package a good woman would have wanted. But yet, he chose restraint. After that conversation, we hugged again. This one wasn't rushed. It lingered longer than the first. And saints, can I be real? The girls, them inside, started misbehaving. I had to start rebuking myself in my head. I was like, listen, man, behave, get your mind together. Because after we talking about this, how can you bring your mind right back to the place you're trying to correct? It's you, man. Because hugs hit different when feelings are mutual. And I remember, thinking, what if Kurt wasn't this strong? What if one of us was weaker than the other? As Jamaicans would say, somebody wouldn't get mashed up. And that's not a joke. That's reality. And our church culture, persons would, allude to saying you're being too fleshy. Yes, it has some weight that can be true. But in the same breath, it's the same God that gives us his spirit, the same God that gives us hormones to remind us that we're living and kicking. What if I couldn't feel that kind of feeling? Then something would have wrong. So the only thing we have to do is practice to cry out, Lord, help me. But anyways, on that note though, I would like to ask you if there's anybody who has been there, if you're bold enough to share, if you've been there, how did you deal with that situation? Or if you're going through it, how are you dealing with that situation? Because when one partner is weaker than the other, how do you manage or keep yourself under control? When one wants to do right and the other is tired of fighting, because this is where many people lose it. Not because they're evil, so get that out of your head. Not because they don't love God, get that out too. But it's not because too that they're not conscious, not because either of those stuff. It's because the strength becomes uneven. And somebody always pays the price for that imbalance, whether it's the woman or the man or both parties. Sometimes their future is affected. But back to me and Kurt. After that hug, we made a decision. We agreed, to just keep our space and boundaries. Because now college was almost finished and you're maturing, you're learning. And so making harsh decisions to help yourself was important. So we adjusted for the most part. We kept our distance. We talked mostly on the phone, creating the space. And as I said, it's not because we didn't care. It's because we cared. And things were just, normalizing. So fast forward to a couple years after. Pretty much we're good. We're doing good, still serving God, still respectful, still cool, still buddies without cuddles, living separate lives, both married people. But he had confessed once that he wished he had married me. But that story, let's say, remains a story. What I will tell you is this. When you are signing up for marriage, make sure God's approval is not an afterthought, because desires will fade and chemistry fluctuates. But you see, obedience, that thing keeps saving you long after the feelings calm down. All right? And before I close, I just want to speak a little bit to our parents, the aunties, uncles, and the big sisters and brothers in church. And I know, I touched on it before in the last video, but this has become an area of concern because of my experiences as a young Christian. Let me tell you, our young people are fighting real battles out there, not imaginary ones, and not social media ones alone. But they're fighting flesh and spirit battles. The same ones we fought. The only difference is that they're dressed differently. And sometimes instead of helping them through it, we ask questions like, are you praying? Are you reading your Bible? Why you let yourself get there? You should know better. You should this, you should that. But be honest, sometimes those questions and statements are safer than real conversation. Because real conversation might expose our past. It might force us to admit we struggled too, that we felt the pull, that we weren't always strong. It's trying to hide behind the questions. We even ask questions that shut things down when somebody's crying out to talk. The truth is sometimes young people don't want to do the things that they get themselves involved in. But every time they make approach, they're shut down. And what the devil does, him work on that. But hear me clearly. Silence. You being silent, mothers, fathers, sisters and brothers and preachers, ministers, you being silent does not always protect the youth. Space does. They don't always need a sermon. Sometimes they just need permission. Permission to say, I'm tempted. I like someone. Can you imagine? You like somebody, your friend will tell them, say, me like somebody, because you know exactly what will come out. Rebuke. Permission to say, I'm tired of fighting. Permission to say, I don't know what to do. And to hear back, me too. Once upon a time, let's talk. If we don't create safe space in the church, they'll create it elsewhere. And guess what? We're the same ones that will look at them, judge them, and give up on them. And we must know that not every space out there loves them. So let's do better. Not by lowering standards, but by raising honesty. Because a church that can't talk about real struggle will always lose people to silence. Guys, me and Kurt wasn't a love story that ended in a kiss. It was a love story that ended in obedience. And even if it was the other way around, I still wouldn't be afraid to share because I know everybody out there is going through something. If this story stirred something in you, if it somehow made you uncomfortable, if it reminded you of someone you had to let go of, you're not weak. And it's just a reminder you're human and you're not alone. It was a pleasure sharing this story, and thank you for listening. See you next time.